My name is Pastor Leeann Huff, and it's my privilege to welcome you here today as we celebrate and honor David Sutherland. So would you please bow with me in prayer? Father, we know that you've always had your hand on David every step of the way. So please give us the peace that passes all understanding as we celebrate this man. Give us the strength to share the beautiful memories that are a part of the legacy that David has left. May your amazing grace sustain each one as they grieve their loss. And now on behalf of this beautiful family, they extend their gratitude to each of you today for joining us to honor David. We know that he was dearly loved and he will be greatly missed. In 2 Corinthians, your word says, God comforts us so that we can comfort others. We can give them the same comfort that he gives to us. And that's what all of you are doing here today. So thank you, Lord, for bringing them to bring their blessings to this family. We trust you, Lord, because you know all things. We praise you and thank you that your wings of love are filling the gap that has been left in their hearts as they put their faith in you. And we agree together in Jesus' name. Amen? Amen. Well, I have a very special guest that's going to come up. His name is Raja, and he's going to share some wonderful memories with you. So please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's on behalf of Vanessa Sutherland and Rick Sutherland, I'd like to thank all of you for gathered here today to celebrate the life of our beloved David Sutherland that we passed on March 23rd of this year. I'm going to take the next few minutes here to give an introduction to David's life so you can get a chronicle of his life and share some thoughts. David Elmer Richard Sutherland was born on Christmas Day, 1940, at Bethesda Hospital in St. Paul, to John Eric Sutherland and Vivian Sutherland Opry. They were dedicated to the Lutheran Church, and with John serving as a pastor and Vivian as a singer. David was the middle child with an older brother, John, and a younger sister, Jean. Through the influence of their mother, the family was musically inclined, with David playing the drums and the piano. John, the older brother, playing the piano as well, and Jean, a singer. Through his early years, the family moved around the Midwest to different locations depending on the church assignments that his father was assigned to, eventually landing in Lily Island, Illinois, during David's early teens. David in his childhood reportedly experienced speech difficulties and was suspected to have a speech disorder with a pronounced stutter, which sometimes made him incomprehensible. Eventually, the doctors treating him figured out that he did not have a speech disorder, but his thoughts were racing so fast. I think people can relate to this. That his words could not keep up, and they ran into each other, so it manifested as a stutter. A family physician who identified this helped him modulate his thoughts with his language to improve his communication. I don't think he was ever completely cured of this problem. Another setback occurred when David contracted polio at age 13. Fortunately, at that time, this was indeed fortunate, he recovered without major neurologic deficits. Tragedy struck the family in 1955 when David was 15 years old. His dad passed away unexpectedly while they were in Illinois. They decided to move to Minnesota and settle down in North St. Paul. David and his brother John worked several jobs during this time to support the family, construction jobs during the summer and during school breaks, while going to school. After graduating high school, David went to Augustana College in Rock Island, Illinois, a Lutheran-affiliated institution, the same college that his brother attended as well. He successfully graduated, returned to Minnesota for medical school, and graduated from medical school at the University of Minnesota in 1966. While in med school, he met and married Karen in 1964, and they would go on to have two children, son Rick and daughter Lara. And through his son Rick, he had a grandson, Ethan, who's 17 years old now, who later would be a trusted companion and a friend to David during his later years. Thank you, Ethan. As a medical student, he worked in the lab of Robert Good, a world-renowned immunologist, and this would shape David's career interest in a big way. He also spent time on Richard Lillahei's service as a medical student, as they were preparing for the world's first pancreas transplant. After med school, he went to West Virginia for a surgical residency, which was interrupted by him joining the Army and being deployed to Vietnam at the Army 2nd Hospital, where he served from 1968 to 70 as an orthopedic trauma surgeon. On the way to Vietnam, David recounts that he actually met Dr. Najarian before leaving for Vietnam, and Najarian had already been aware of his work with Dr. Good and approached him and said, when you come back, we'll be glad to have you at the University of Minnesota. And so when he finished in Vietnam and came back in 1970, he did join the University of Minnesota. As he would recall later, his experience in Vietnam offered him a new perspective on human life and humanity as a whole, and helped him develop a compassion for the suffering which would shape his outlook as a clinician in the future. He returned from Vietnam, completed surgical residency at the University of Minnesota in 1975. During this time, he worked towards his PhD in John Najarian's lab in the area of islet transplantation. He was conferred a PhD in 1977. His fellowship, he went on to do a transplant fellowship here, which he completed in 1975 and was recruited as faculty in 1976. The rest is a blur because he would embark on what can only be summed up as a trailblazing career in the field of transplantation and immunology. His academic achievements are too numerous to enlist in this talk, but it would suffice to say that David pioneered the areas of pancreas, allo, and auto islet transplantation as we know it today. He became a full professor in 1984, head of the Division of Transplant in 1994, which he led until 2009. He founded the Diabetes Institute of Immunology and Transplantation at the University of Minnesota, which is a world-renowned institute, now still functioning as the Schultz Diabetes Institute under the leadership of Bernard Herring. He served as a president of all the major societies he was involved in, including the American Society of Transplant Surgeons, International Pancreas and Islet Transplant Association, and the Transplantation Society. He has received numerous awards, again, too numerous to be listed, but he did receive the highest honor in the field of transplantation, which is the Medawar Prize in 2012 in Berlin. On a personal front, he met Vanessa in 1995, married her in 1996, and they've shared a strong bond for the next 30 years. David, in his own words, stated that Vanessa was the most important person in his life, and he cared deeply about her well-being. To that end, he donated his kidney to her in 2006. I remember the morning of the surgery, just like yesterday, when I was about to go into the operating room, when the phone rang, and it was Dr. Najarian on the other end. He said, "Please take care of David. He's like my own son." No pressure at all. When you're about to operate on your boss, and your boss's boss calls you, basically say, don't screw up. Anyway, it all turned out well, and I kept my job. David retired from his academic job in 2012, and to his final days, he said he greatly missed the operating room. He faced, the trials and tribulations of aging, and which he really did face with admirable courage and stoicism. By the time 2025 arrived, it was clear to us that were around him that David, in his steely determination, had decided it was time to transition. He left this world on his own terms with acceptance and dignity at St. Three's home in Arden Hills, a few miles from where he was born 8.5 decades ago. David, I will always remember you as a kind, compassionate, generous, and witty man with a crazy, brilliant mind. You were not only my mentor, but also my friend and philosopher. You took me under your wing, and I cannot thank you enough for that. I will miss you more than you will ever know.
Amazing. That was well written, thank you, that was beautiful. Well, I have a couple probably of a repeat of what Raja said, because I had the pleasure of meeting with Vanessa as we reminisced about David. And all I can say is he was an amazing man. Skill, talent, intelligence, and humility are all a part of his character. Like Raja shared, David's father was a circuit pastor, so they moved around quite a bit. He was that Star of David, born on Christmas Day. And when he went on to college and med school, he did become an amazing surgeon. David served in Vietnam during the war and not only tended to our servicemen, but a story that Vanessa shared is that he also tended to some of the civilians. He actually, now get this, picture this in your mind, he actually had to operate on a man that they held upside down as David was laying on his back. Now that would be a challenging way to do surgery. How many of you surgeons would agree with that, right? Well, David was married and was blessed with his son Rich and his daughter Laura. And a favorite pastime that David and Rich had when he was growing up was to travel to the other states, and they would follow the Twins teams and tour around and just go to some of those games. Talk about a good time, huh? Good memories. There were many destinations to travel because David was invited to speak at many conferences. They ventured to several countries in Africa, off to Greece, and of course to Sweden, so that he could discover his Swedish heritage. And there were many trips to Puerto Rico to visit Vanessa's family, and then there were beautiful trips to Hawaii for a much-needed vacation. Now, David wasn't much of a TV watcher, but he was an avid reader, and how he loved his books. Not only did he love them so much, he saved them. Now, I didn't say hoarder, I didn't say that, but when the fire marshals came to the office and mentioned to him that he should empty out some of those books from that office, well, that tells you he loved those books, right? David loved to eat, especially a delicious steak, a nice piece of salmon, and don't forget butter. He loved butter. Oh, come on, how many of you love butter? Yeah, I do. I always have some potato with my butter. You know. But absolutely no rice. He did not care for rice. And I was thinking about that. That was probably reminiscent of his days in Vietnam. My husband came home from Nam, and boy, the first few years we were married, he wouldn't touch rice with a 10-foot pole. David loved listening to opera music. He loved snow skiing and biking. He grew delicious tomatoes and lovely roses. This was a multi-talented man. But his true passion was surgery. But another love that David had was for his son Ethan, for his grandson Ethan. Challenging was time to spend with him, but I heard that you two had some great chess games, right?
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. And that is quality time that you get to spend with your grandpa. David also enjoyed his two Angora cats, Orion and Jupiter. I like those names. That was kind of cool, wasn't it? Orion and Jupiter. But unfortunately, David's health began to decline, and he will tell you that that's the way the cookie crumbles. Right, Vanessa? That's the way the cookie crumbles. He developed cardiovascular dementia, and all I can say is, what a waste of talent and skill. I will never understand why that disease does what it does. But I do believe that David's faith foundation can't be stolen. There's a verse in Scripture in Romans that says, "For I am persuaded that neither death nor life, nor angels or principalities, nor powers or things present or things to come, nor height nor depth, nor any other creature shall be able to separate us from the love of God, the love in Christ Jesus." I believe that David is now in heaven, whole, healthy, and healed. And And as we put our trust in Christ, He promised us a home in heaven for eternity. Religion is when you're unable to do enough. But relationship is just surrendering to Jesus, and that's all He's looking for. And it's simple to make that choice. You just can't wait till it's too late to do that. Amen? So I'm going to invite Sara up, and she's going to share a few things, and then she's going to sing.
Hopefully we're all going to sing. Okay. We're all going to sing. That's why you all got the hymnal, which David is my dad's cousin, and my Aunt Beth over there is also a first cousin with David. But he was special in our family, particularly because, I was at the University of Minnesota for a number of years as a student, and then worked there at the University of Minnesota China Center, and during those years connected with him. And then in 2010 we were in Malaysia, and my 2-year-old, who's now 17, was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And so suddenly all of the studying and the great research that David had been doing for so long was very personal. And we spent 17 years in Malaysia and just returned last July. But I was just looking at the emails that David and I had over the years, because Gloria was suffering herself. We had a special connection as family members. And the week that he passed away, we were able to visit him the day before he went into not being as responsive. And it was really precious because Gloria, who's 17, got to meet David and share. She had brought this little verse from Colossians 1 and posted it on his bed on the side and read it to him. And then I just asked Uncle David, I call him Uncle David, what is a favorite hymn that you remember? And he's like, well, he didn't really answer it as his favorite hymn, but he remembered his mom, Vivian's favorite hymn being How Firm a Foundation. And so I, as a good millennial or whatever age I am, I looked it up on YouTube, and so we sang it together. And that was some of the last hours that he was conscious. The next day we came back and visited, and he was not responsive. And so, again, spent some time. But I'm so thankful to God's mercy in allowing that time in his last hours of being aware. And so we are going to, Rick, his son, has always been an amazing violinist, so he's going to start us out with the violin. I will accompany him on the piano, so we'll run through the chorus once, and then we are not the singers. Uncle Dan is going to sing with me, but we would love to have, as many of you know this hymn. What are we singing, Uncle Dan? Which verses? 1, 2, and 5. So you can enjoy.
The thing is, this is your chance to stand, and if you sing really loud, we'll sound a lot better.
Yes, we'll do our best. And Rick is working.
Right. Anybody want to stand? Stand.
We'll play through the whole melody once, just us, and then you can sing. So you get to hear the tune and go already.
Vanessa, are you going to come up first, or Raja, you're going to come up?
Certainly, I'm really. Hello? Okay. Certainly, I'm extremely happy that all of you came. And even David was a very humble man, but I think that he really would have liked to see you all because he liked to be recognized as well. He worked really hard, but certainly he enjoyed that. And even the fact that you all make just the effort for coming and to honor him, and I know that this is a celebration, but certainly of life, but certainly my heart really hurt. And it's going to be a little bit hard for me to just take my life again. I'm really, as well, I know that you came for him, but I'm extremely grateful that he came from many parts of US. So I'm extremely, extremely happy. And I know that if in a way he could see all the people responding to him and honoring him, he's going to be really happy. Because he likes to be recognized. He worked really hard as well. And even though he was a humble man, he wanted to be celebrated. Every time that I see him with a different manner or with a saying that he haven't said before, I know that it was a new, at the time, fellow that influenced him. Because certainly he got patience, and he really loved people. I know that it has to be a special bond with his fellows. And in order of the way that he come beside his son Richard and his grandson Ethan, is the way that they came, he got his particular songs. And one was Rainer Gross. In order of appearance, at least in my life, it was Peter Stock, then Rainer Grossner. Everybody was important, but I think that, and Raja Kandaswamy. And it just was extremely important. And this is a child that he gave of David that he gave to me. It was Anne-Marie Papers. Nobody can those names were really, joined my life and by the destiny. I want to say that first was Peter Stock, then was Reiner, and the last one again was Raja Kandaswamy. Raja as well, that the friend, he was really close to him, and he did see the gravity of his disease. David have left several lessons of life. One is that you do what you really want and you're a happy man. And he works very hard for that. The other thing is just I learned it just because he didn't do exactly what I thought that he could be. That was his identity really, and his very first love. And the thing that he liked the best was to be in a surgeon. It is very interesting that when he was in the army, in Vietnam particularly, he was an orthopedic. He took an orthopedic surgeon. He took limbs from the people that needed for them to give him life. When he got the opportunity to to do something different by himself. He chose transplantation. He did choose transplantation. He put organs for people to have a better life. He was my donor as well. And I don't know, sometimes I think it was for me, or it was really because that is a part of transplantation. And that's something that he really loved a lot. And he loved individually all of you. Thanks so much for coming and being with him and being with me as well. What to say? It has been extremely difficult for me to talk about a person that I really love a lot. And then, as I was saying, you love people as a package. The good and bad. And certainly his life without surgery was extremely hard. I know that is a celebration of life, but certainly he did suffer in 2012 not to do surgery anymore. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for being as well with me. And thank you so much for celebrating him. He'll be so extremely happy that the people that he like is with him. Particularly Reiner, particularly Raja, Peter Stock, and as well David Dunn, that flew far away, Archimedes, that was his, actually they really know since the 80s it was. And that was really good for me because he liked people, all of you are important, Barbie, Ilek, Anne-Marie Bebas, and I have to thank overall my sister, Naomi Hermanos, that she really have helped me a lot in the things we just have, and of course, Ryder. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Vanessa. Can you guys hear me okay? Good. So, I think I've been introduced, but I'm Rick Sutherland. I'm David's son. I'm here with my son Ethan, his grandson, who you've heard about from a few speakers already. I'm going to, just like Vanessa, say a few words of thanks and then a couple of quick anecdotes about my dad. I do want to thank all of you for coming on behalf of our family. Thanks to everyone who's contributing to the service today with music and the words of remembrance. I do want to thank many people, friends and family members who supported my dad and stayed in touch with him through the years after he retired. Many of you are here in the room. He wasn't always great at reciprocating communication or initiating communication, but he always appreciated hearing from you. There were so many times when I was with him and the phone would ring and he would answer and engage even for a 1-minute conversation. He was so happy when people reached out to him, if they visited in person, called him on the phone, sent him a letter. If he didn't respond, know that he appreciated hearing from you. I want to thank the caregivers and medical providers that supported him during his last 13, 15 years. Many of you are here in the room, the physicians and nurses at M Health Fairview that helped him. He was a physician there for many years, and then he transitioned to being a patient. And when he would go, there were so many people that would come and seek him out to tell him how much they appreciate working with him, share memories of his great work with me and with Ethan. Almost every time we took him in for care, someone was there to tell us a story about the times that they worked with him and how much they appreciated him. So we felt that love, and he felt that love, and loved being a patient there. Not as much as he loved being a surgeon there, but he still loved being a patient and being able to go back to the university for his care. I do want to thank the facilities that cared for him. He lived at the Kenwood Assisted Living in the uptown area of Minneapolis since 2018. Many great caregivers there, friends, his meal companions. They navigated through the COVID years remarkably well. A lot of long-term care facilities had a lot of challenges. They did a great job of taking care of their residents during those COVID years. Made for some challenging times where Ethan and I had to visit him from the parking lot or from a picnic bench, but they were really good about keeping people healthy, and he survived the COVID years really well. The last few days of his life at St. Therese, St. Odelia in Shoreview, remarkable care there. Thank you. Some of the folks from both caregivers and residents are here today. They facilitated his last few days of care in such a careful and compassionate way. And as was mentioned, I think Raja mentioned, he passed out of his life gracefully, peacefully, comfortably, secure where he was going next. And the people at St. Therese, St. Odelia really facilitated that and made that possible. So thank you. Ethan's gotten some love already. He really was a fantastic grandson, always thinking of ways to keep Grandpa David engaged in life, having fun. One thing, you mentioned David's favorite food. You didn't mention dessert. Ethan made sure that Grandpa David had dessert. And one time we forgot at a meal at my place, and sure enough, after we were done and we started cleaning up, Grandpa David said, "Where's dessert?" And we scrambled to find something. We never forgot after that, and Ethan made sure when we were shopping for Grandpa David that we always got dessert. Usually chocolate ice cream was probably his favorite, but we made sure there was always dessert. Vanessa, thank you so much for being his loving wife for so many years. He was challenging to love at times, at many times. But Vanessa kept on caring for him and loving him even through the challenging times. She made sure that he was in safe and stable housing, that he was in a place where he could get the care that he needed. She sacrificed so much to make sure that he was well taken care of. Vanessa, you were such a strong advocate for him. There were times where David wasn't able to advocate effectively for himself, and Vanessa made sure that he was well taken care of. So thank you, Vanessa, for loving David and caring for him all those many years. And I know he loved you and appreciated you even at the times where he wasn't able to communicate that as effectively. Vanessa thanked her sister, Namir, and I have to thank you too, Vanessa and Namir. Namir, you were right by Vanessa's side. You often traveled across the country to help her. Vanessa couldn't have done the care that she did for David without you there too, in the last months and the last days, but also in the years preceding. Many times when David needed help, Vanessa was there and Namir was there to help him too. I'll talk a little bit about my dad. I want to thank him for the impact he's had on my life, on many lives that he saved and improved throughout his medical career. He brought a lot of joy to professional relationships, personal relationships. A lot of things that bring me joy and bring Ethan joy today are things I learned from my dad, and then we shared with Ethan. A lot of these have been mentioned: bicycling, baseball, classical music. My dad loved classical music. That violin, me playing the violin was probably inspired by him. Chess, we mentioned chess earlier. All my dad's passions, many of which are now shared by myself and by Ethan also. One thing when I was a child that I still remember, a child and into my teenage years, my dad and I would frequently dedicate time on spring and summer weekends, days like today, beautiful weather, to practicing baseball. My dad was really good at hitting balls. It was just the two of us, and he could hit balls to himself. So he'd throw the ball up in the air, hit the ball out to me. I'd be way out in the outfield, and he could hit the balls close to me, far away from me. He was really good at aiming that. We spent hours with him tossing the ball up and hitting balls to me. And at the end of every session, he always said we needed to end with me making a great catch. So he'd hit the ball just far enough away that it was challenging for me to get there, but I could get there. And I had a shot to catch it. When I did make that last catch, he'd shout, "Great catch, Rick." And I think that really epitomized his approach to life. He was always encouraging me, encouraging others to challenge ourselves to improve, test the limits and boundaries of what we could achieve, both individually and collectively. So I'll remember that anytime I'm catching a ball or see a fly ball hit, I'll remember what my dad did and think of that as a representation of what he did for all of us. So thanks for everything, and rest in peace, Dad.
Good afternoon, dear Vanessa, dear Rick, dear Ethan, family, dear friends, and colleagues of Dr. Sutherland. It is an honor to be here today to share memories, to celebrate Dr. Sutherland's life, and to say final goodbye. To those of you who don't know me, I'm Bernhard Hering. I have had the privilege of interacting with Dr. Sutherland at the Diabetes Institute for Immunology and Transplantation for more than 20 years. Dr. Sutherland founded the Diabetes Institute in our Department of Surgery in 1995 to broaden the adoption of beta cell replacement in diabetes care. He liked the term beta cell replacement to include pancreas and islet transplantation. Pancreas being the big, at times the dirty islet, and islet the smaller islet. Having previously pioneered pancreas transplantation and islet autotransplantation, his vision and passion turned to leveraging advances in immunology and transplantation to cure type 1 diabetes. He built the Diabetes Institute to provide structure, support, and focus for advancing islet cell transplantation and immune tolerance into tangible benefits for patients burdened by diabetes. The logo that Dr. Sutherland chose for the Diabetes Institute embodies the spirit of his vision. The logo portrays a person dancing and embracing a renewed life that follows pancreas or islet transplantation. A new life no longer constrained by daily anxieties of diabetes. I have been fortunate to work under Dr. Sutherland. His presence was always uplifting, both fun and deeply inspiring. His brilliant mind was evident in his gift for distilling complex ideas into a single, succinct sentence. His insights were profound and his imagination boundless. His enthusiasm was infectious, driven by constant curiosity and openness to new perspectives. I remember one day when David stopped by and said something that perfectly captured his creative and provocative way of thinking. Imagine, Bernhard, if pancreas or islet transplantation had been the original treatment for diabetes, and now a handful of diabetologists were trying to replace it with a fancy new therapy, insulin injections. How could they possibly justify that? Dr. Sutherland was a truly fine human being, cared deeply for his patients, always kind, generous with his advice, and never one to speak ill of others. With characteristic grace, he entrusted me with the responsibility for our islet transplant program. When I arrived here almost 30 years ago, Dr. Sutherland explained how things work in Minnesota. He told me when he joined the faculty, Dr. Nacharian had told him, it's time to resume pancreas transplantation. We should work on it. It's yours to develop. There's only one single rule. If something goes terribly wrong, make sure I'm not the last to find out. Admittedly, it's a small piece of real estate, but you can build tall, and tall he built. In a similar way, I was given the privilege of leading the islet transplant program. Dr. Sutherland was always available and genuinely interested and fully engaged. Yet, he never second-guessed or let alone overturned a single decision I made. Though it was an even smaller piece of real estate, I had the freedom to build, and for that I'm deeply grateful to him. Goodbye, David. You have earned the respect and admiration of your peers as the pioneer of beta cell replacement for diabetes. The legacy you leave behind is profound and momentous and inspiring. Thank you for your example, your steadfast support, your friendship, and the time we could share. Rest in peace.
Good afternoon. My name is Barb Elick, and I was, I think, the first pancreas transplant coordinator anywhere, somewhere. I worked with Dad for many, many years, and he was a mentor, a colleague, and a dear friend. I first met Dave over the phone in 1978. I was in Dallas working with a surgeon who had just performed the first transplant, the first pancreas transplant in Texas. And when things went south, as they sometimes do, he asked me to call Dr. Sutherland in Minnesota. Of course, back then, you called the information operator in Minneapolis, and they gave you the phone number that they had. Well, he answered the phone. He was sweeping the kitchen and letting the dog out the back door as we talked. That was my Dr. Sutherland, willing to help, not bothered, totally approachable, open with information, and genuinely caring. After moving to Minnesota to work with the transplant program, I was housed or based in part of Dr. Sutherland's office, working with the late John Ronnie Savage and the late Janet Sanders. His cluttered office references were indicative of his sharp mind, even though all of us knew exactly where the fire extinguishers were. And we knew him so well, we could all identify him coming down the hall, given that unusual gait. I was on call for decades, as I recall, and Dr. Sutherland and I were in cahoots. My work with him started with the 8th transplant. And after a couple of thousand islet and pancreas transplants, I noticed today that the Fairview University website touts itself as one of the oldest pancreas transplant programs. It is the oldest pancreas transplant program. I was privileged to be included in the beginning of that program with weekly meetings with people like Dr. Fred Getz, Mike Maurer, Bob Ramsey, Mike Steffes, and Bill Kennedy. And we were privileged to be able to write a protocol whereby we studied patients before and after pancreas transplantation to see what the changes and complications were. And I have a million more stories that I could tell, and Dr. Sutherland and I often reminisce about the many wonderful patients and colleagues across the world. But I'd like to relate to you something about his generosity and kindness. He once told me, you know, Barbara, when you first came here, we agreed on everything, and now we don't agree on anything. And he said, what bothers me most is that I think you're right. Now, what a gift. I think we only had one argument in the many years that I worked with him. And I felt bad because I actually lied about it. I wanted him to do a biopsy, an open biopsy on a pancreas transplant recipient, and he said, I'm not going to do that. It's invasive, and you come in if you wanted to do it. And we had this kind of back and forth. And when he called me at home, I told my daughter not to tell him that I was in the shower or something. So I felt bad about that. But the next day, I found out that he had done the biopsy. And it was an important one. It was on a identical twin. I learned so much from him, his generosity of knowledge and willingness to learn, his kindness and his friendship. Even in his later days, we laughed. One time, as I was helping him situate in the bed, I asked, which one of your knees is the bad one? And he laughed and said, I forgot. Dr. Sutherland, you will always, always be in my heart.
Good afternoon. My name's Kathy Garvey, and I was asked to say a few words this afternoon as a representative of the nurses that worked with Dr. Sutherland over the years. So I took advantage of that and texted all my old transplant nurses and got a lot of feedback. You'll hear it. Much has been written and addressed by others that tell us about Dr. Sutherland. Father of pancreas transplant, president of multiple prestigious medical societies, prolific author of scientific articles, holder of multiple distinguished awards, and an international mentor. All great accomplishments and well-deserved. We nurses also celebrated these accomplishments. But as happens in workplaces, we get to know our co-workers and colleagues in a more personal, almost a family way. This was certainly true at the transplant program at the U, and that is where I'm going to share a few behind-the-scenes stories, in no order and based on feedback from my nurse friends. Mary Rolfe would frequently do pre-transplant clinic with him and recounts Dr. Sutherland flying into clinic in his scrubs, scouting anxiously for any free lab coat and grabbing it. Before seeing the patient, Mary stopped him and told him his lab coat had darts. He needed to find another one. On occasion, Mary would find him some food when he said his blood sugar was low, and occasionally offered to move his car, which might have been parked illegally at the PWB entrance. Mary Beth would have to answer clinic patients after Dr. Sutherland left the room because he had informed them that he ate a stick of butter a day. Whether that was true or not, she was never sure. Dr. Sutherland's patients loved him. They were loyal and supportive to him and his research because they felt his love and loyalty. I remember a living donor that had a large tree of life tattooed on her abdomen and instructed him to make sure that tattoo was correctly aligned when post-donation. It was, and she was thrilled. Here comes a theme. Although he knew where things were, Dr. Sutherland's office would not have met fire code. And when it got too cramped in there, he moved to a nice sunny windowsill outside his office. His organizational skills also included multiple briefcase, tote bags, backpacks, often labeled with whatever recent conference he had attended. And who Sutherland's genuine personality, sense of humor, and sincere interest and respect for us. We too cared for him. I'll close with Chris Strasberg's comments. I remember a good-hearted doctor who followed his professional instincts and sometimes defied conventional wisdom to get the best outcome he could for his patients. And they loved him for it. You'll be missed. Thank you.
Thank you so much for letting me come up here and speak. I'm not much of a public speaker, but I will share a little about my past with David. My name is Hank Salmon, and I was honored to get to know David when I was 5 years old, after my dad had his pancreas transplant. Back then, I got to get to know David over the years, and he was just so generous and caring and really cared about my dad's health. My dad is not here with us today. He passed away a couple years ago. And I got to spend 33 years more of my dad's life just because of David. And without David, I don't know that I'd ever get to know my dad. In the past years though, David would call me, drive him places. He always knew what the right way was going to go, and sometimes he'd go, no, we won't make it there on time, and I go, David, we're fine, we'll get there. just patience. We'll get there. He was a very generous, smart man, and I love him so much, and I love Vanessa, and I'm so grateful that he was comfortable enough to call me whenever he needed something. If it was just to grab him to the store, or just if he wanted to get out of the house for a little bit. In the years past, I don't know. I have so many stories to tell about David, and I don't even know where to begin. As I'm looking at this, because I wrote them all down, but if it was just at his house in the River Boulevard, trying to fix his wood floors because he had water damage, or if it was just a random, I don't even know, just randomly, but I just am so honored to be asked to be up here, and I just don't even know what to say. We'll all miss David so much, and I'm just very honored to get to know such a wonderful family and be there whenever he needed me. So in closing, I just want to say thank you so much for letting me be up here, and I will have say so many stories, but I don't even know where to begin. So I love you, David, and I'll miss you, and I hope you're having fun up in heaven with my dad. So, thank you.
Before we go to the final rendering by the musicians, I'd like to call upon a couple of people that Vanessa mentioned in her speech to come and say a few words. Rainer Drusner is here, Peter Stock, and David Dunn. So we'll start with Rainer here. Let him come up.
Thanks, brother. Vanessa, family, friends. It's great to be back. I always thought I prefer deep Minnesota. After David Dunn became chairman, I thought we'd all retire here one day. Lovely Minnesota, but it was meant to be different. Now, I could just say one sentence and stop there and say, I really lost a dear friend, a very dear friend. And I noticed last time when I was driving from New York City to the NIH in DC. And I would, when I went down there, sporadically, give David a call because it's a long ride. So I started dialing, only to realize that David wasn't there anymore. So that's the first time that really set in that an era had ended. And it's not an era just of personal relationships, but more so. For Minnesota, the Department of Surgery, it meant an end of the golden era of surgical transplantation or transplantation surgery. Not that people now are not doing great things and so forth, but first, and doing things, thinking outside of the box. No IRB. Doing what you think serves the patient best was what we all loved. We had nurses and coordinators, and I have been chairing departments at different institutions that I never met again with their dedication and devotion. It was highly, highly unusual. Now everyone knows about David, and I don't have to reiterate that he's probably one of the most preeminent surgeons of the second half of the last century because of the many firsts that he introduced. But I want to say a few things that about the man himself. Now, I have known David for 40 years. 20 years he has been initially my teacher, my mentor, later my partner, but above all my friend. And in those remaining 20 years where we lived different locations, I talked to David at least twice a week. And despite the fact that I knew him well, there were other things that I think very few people know about him. He was a very sensitive man. What bothered him the most in the last 2 years was that he thought he had failed some patients, and he had disappointed and hurt some of his loved ones, his family, Vanessa, and others. And I told him, David, don't dwell on the failures or the perceived mishappenings. Dwell on, how you evaluated the sorrow and the misery of so many patients. And he listened to it, but I knew he was just listening because, like myself, he had a very rigid Lutheran upbringing. So, this feeling, unfortunately, of that he was not perfect went with him for many, many years. And it just shows how an extraordinary man he was, because he really was respected and loved by so many. It's very rare in our field that there is no one out there that talks badly about you behind your back. That never happened with David. People just loved him because he was so open. And even before we talked about DEI, this was something that was just in his DNA. Inclusiveness, sharing, never keeping things to himself, promoting others, being a mentor to others. He trained so many people that eventually became directors and chairs and chiefs and whatnot. But it was the esteem and loyalty that he created just by being himself. A very approachable, humble, modest person. And above all, something that, after we talked about the recent elections, he was worried about what would happen to science and medicine. There's one thing that really characterizes and epitomizes him very well: empathy. Empathy for his patients, for his family, for the people he worked with. If someone had a problem or so, he tried to help, and if he couldn't help, he was sometimes really devastated. Now, some people, and that's maybe I'm talking a little bit about more of what I should do, but some people always said, oh, David, he always thought outside of the box and came up with new ideas and so forth. But in fact, everything that he did was very disciplined and very principled and strategic. I remember when Paul Gores left, we spent many evenings together at our home or his home, and then later with Vanessa to talk about how island transplantation, as Bernhard so nicely summarized, should be developed further. We got a lot of critique when we started doing living donor pancreas transplants. But don't forget, at the time, many of our patients died on the waiting list because the pancreas was following the kidney and not vice versa. And these patients just died. And that's what we do. And some of these transplanters still work to this day. Another one of these things was when we started to think about tolerance induction, the holy grail of transplantation. And David said, well, we have to come up with something where we don't use calcineurin inhibitors and steroids and so on. And it was Campus. And it was an utter failure. But you can imagine how much he suffered when he heard, that some of these patients had developed bad complications. I told him later that some of these patients actually are now on monotherapy or no therapy at all. Some of those patients really made it. But he was just so sensitive about that something bad could happen to his patients. He was a Renaissance man. I remember when he had a cabin, we were boating, and he really enjoyed it. He was playing tennis with the fellows, golf with the donors. He was not good at either one, and he didn't pretend, but it was just, the company of everyone. As it was said, he loved American history, Lincoln, the team of rivals and all of that. Those were things, you could constantly talk to him about all these things. And then finally, despite all of that, being humble, modest, passionate, empathetic, whatever you want to call it, he was a true Minnesota boy. He was born here, he went to school, he went to university, he did residency, and so forth, and so forth, and so forth. I remember in the 1990s we were asked to move our programs to different places in the United States, and it would have given David clearly the promotion. But in the end he couldn't. I mean, I remember it like yesterday. We sat on a winter day in the kitchen of my home here in Medina, and he said, "Ryan, I just can't leave this place. I love it so much. I mean, I will not leave it." And I made a final attempt in 2012 after he stopped working. I told him, "David, why don't you come to Arizona? Vanessa is going to love it there because the weather is so much more comparable to Puerto Rico than here in Minnesota. Why don't you do it?" But he couldn't do it. So in closing, all I can say is I think he was an extraordinary person who touched the lives of so many of us in such a beautiful way that all I wish for him is to rest in eternal peace. And if he hadn't been before, he now is for the ages. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk here today.
Thank you, Rainer. I think the only thing keeping us from the reception right now is the music. We're going to go to a rendering of Cante Partiro, musicians, and then we'll have David Dunn and Peter Stark lead off in the open mic session once we get our refreshments.
Sogli all'orizzonte manca le parole, silenzio che non c'è luce in una stanza quando manca il sole, se non ci sei tu con me, su le finestre mostra tutti il mio cuore che c'è su, chiudi dentro me la luce che hai incontrato per strada. Con te partirò, adesso sì li vivrò.
Wonderful. Thank you to Nathan Romportl and Lynn Stonehocker. That was amazing. Really, I think we'll continue the musical rendition in the open mic area while we transition to the gathering room for refreshments. And there's three areas. There's a foyer in front of this hall where you initially entered. There's another foyer adjacent to it. And then there's a room with tables where the refreshments would be that adjoins that. The restrooms are to the right. There's two sets of restrooms, one off the dining hall and one off the foyer. So gather, get your refreshments, and in 10 to 15 minutes, we'll start with open mic, which I'll have Rainer Grusner lead that session. And our musicians will continue some renditions while we're getting our refreshments. Thank you again. Thank you all.
Tom, how are you? Good, how are you?
Outside shooting wildlife.
Yeah, I mean, this is the real wildlife.
Yeah.
I was well trained by
Yeah, I'm so sorry about your son there. That's horrible. So.
Yeah, not what you expect.
Yeah. So, anyways,
it's tough.
Yeah, I can imagine. So, anyways, well, great to see you.
Yeah,
okay.
probably we'll see what happens with the open mic.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know what's going on with that. No.
Hi, Brian. How are you? Oh, no,
Thanks for being here.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
Greg, okay, how are you? The thing that always makes me